had a great childhood. My grandparents really instilled, the history and, the pride of being Assyrian, and from our families coming with nothing and creating, a home and a better life for their children. And my grandparents gave that to my dad, and my dad gave it to us. And I would love to do that in the future for my own.
Hello, Assyrian podcast family. It's John here in Chicago with episode 109. For our day ones, yes, it's been a while for me, and for those who joined us fairly recently or are listening for the first time, welcome and thank you for lending your ears. Like quite a few of our guests on the podcast, I didn't know of John Badal until very recently. Last October, a friend of mine tagged me on a Facebook post from Chicago Reader about someone who had won a contest which awarded him a space in an upcoming urban space food hall. I read the article and learned about John's barbecue cuisine and of his Armenian and Assyrian heritage when I read the line, quote, "He gained a love of food from his family and has Assyrian and Armenian roots," end quote. That's all I needed to read. While his Assyrian and Armenian grandparents were first-generation Americans who were assimilated into the culture, they did not shy away from telling their children and subsequently their grandchildren about who they were and where their parents came from. For those who rightfully worry about losing ancestral homeland, our mother tongue, and our history, can look to John not as a cautionary tale, but a tale of hope. Despite an American upbringing, often being the lone Assyrian in school, and strong American identity, he still holds on to his roots, which is a testament to unwavering Assyrians everywhere. Plus, the guy picked grape leaves as a kid, so he's just as official as any of us, right? Support for this week's episode of the Assyrian Podcast is brought to you by Tony Kalogerakos and the injury lawyers of Illinois and New York. If you know anyone that has been in a serious accident, please reach out to Tony Kalogerakos. Tony has been recognized as a top 40 lawyer and a rising star by Super Lawyers publication and has obtained multiple multi-million-dollar awards. Tony can be reached at injuryrights.com or 847-982-9516. Now let's start the show. John, thank you so much for taking some time out to have this talk with me. First things first, I know things have been pretty crazy since March, COVID, quarantine, all that wild stuff. How's everything going for you just in general?
You know what? Everything's been pretty good. I mean, a lot of people have been struggling, and I have a ton of compassion and sympathy for that. I've stayed busy. I just keep cooking. I've still been in discussions with a lot of community businesses, and everybody's trying to find a way, and it's working for right now. It's working.
Good. And I'm assuming you've been keeping busy enough to the point where even visiting family and friends probably would have been a little bit on the back burner regardless, right?
Yeah, I mean, my parents, we're really close. We're here on the northwest side of the city, Edison Park. My wife and I have an apartment a block or two away from them. My grandparents, my Assyrian grandparents, are another mile away in Niles. So
Nice.
I haven't seen them. Obviously, I don't want to get them in sick or anything like that. But I'm hoping the tide's changing. The weather's great. It's hot. So getting that Chicago vibe back.
For sure. And it's a good vibe to have too. And we'll touch a little bit more on your parents and your grandparents as well. First things first, and our audience will know about this due to the intro that we both write up and record that goes at the beginning of the episode. But tell us about your general love of food and what drew you to the culinary arts specifically.
So my grandparents are first generation. They were born here in 1929, the Lincoln Park area. It's a completely different area than it is today.
Yeah.
So my grandfather, right around 1947 or 1949, I can't remember, he was a butcher. So he started working with a lot of German and Polish immigrants that were in Chicago also. And he made a living out of it, being a butcher. My grandmother's a great cook. So My dad did a lot of cooking when we were growing up, and we were just always at the dinner table. We always had a garden. Sometimes we went picking for grape leaves every once in a while in the forest preserves and stuff. And
Nice.
I don't know. I mean, I was the only kid in my class that was Assyrian or Armenian. So
Wow.
telling people that you're in the forest preserve picking grape leaves, my Irish and Polish friends are like, "What? What the hell? What's that?" So,
That's
food's
fantastic.
always been a big deal. We were always together for holidays and stuff like that.
Kind of to build off of that, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that it was your grandparents that were first generation in 1929.
Yeah. So my great grandparents that came from Iran, and my dad could probably tell you more about it. I'm not with all the detail, but they
Sure.
came after the 19th century, probably around 1915,
Wow.
1920, and then they started a family here. A lot of Assyrians immigrated to Chicago, Michigan, obviously, so California. But yeah, they stayed here. My both of my grandparents were born here, so that's what makes them first generation. This is right at the Great Depression, and they call Chicago their home.
I can tell because a lot of people tell me that I have an accent, especially when I'm around Assyrians. And I haven't met anybody who is Assyrian who has a more Chicago accent than I do until speaking to you today, because you
Well,
definitely sound like a multi generation, been here for a long time Chicagoan.
yeah. So I mean, my mother is Swedish Norwegian, so I take a lot
Wow.
from her side. But my dad, he's Assyrian Armenian. My grandfather's Assyrian, and my grandmother's Assyrian Armenian. So that's where we get the Armenian part. Um,
Wow.
yeah, my grandmother, speaks a little bit of Turkish. They speak fluent. Me growing up, they didn't teach us. They wanted to probably gossip behind our backs, so we didn't know what they were talking about. But I mean, I don't resent it. I kind of find it where I wish, I could speak a little bit
Do you
and be able to
understand any of
learn.
it after all these years? Have you picked up on a little bit of it?
Not much, no.
Not
Uh,
much.
I just know all the bad words.
Of course, that's the first thing anybody learns in any language is all the stuff that you shouldn't be saying, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that's a great story, and you mentioned, European roots, as well. You mentioned Norwegian and Swedish, was it?
Yeah.
Is there any background, familiarity with that side as well, whether it's linguistic or just kind of the family history on the European side?
Well, yeah. So my mom's side, my grandfather, they're so both sides are very proud, right? Assyrians, Armenians are very proud. When my grandfather, so my mom's father, when they came over from Sweden and Norway, Ericsson and Anderson, they settled on the south side. So my grandfather had a ton of pictures that they were building the toboggan sleds for the forest preserves. They brought a lot of that Scandinavian culture to the south suburbs.
Wow.
Harvey, Dalton, Lagrange, all that.
So you mentioned they settled on the south side, and then your Assyrian and Armenian great grandparents and grandparents were in Lincoln Park.
Hmm.
How did that matchup kind of work or come to be?
Well, my parents ended up working in a I forgot what the company was called. It was just a corporate office downtown. My mom would take the electric line from the south side in, and then my dad would. They lived around Independence Park, Monticello, and Irving Park Avenue, and the rest is history. And I'm here.
Right on. And then we'll touch a little bit more on that later on as well. But now, kind of getting back into food, you obviously come from two backgrounds that have a cuisine all to themselves that are very different. What was your motivation, firstly, and vision behind North Branch Gourmet?
So I started cooking professionally in 2010. Even in high school, I used to work at the Park Ridge Dairy Queen, which is, just to pay the bills, pay for your cell phone, have some spending money for the weekend. So like my work ethic through my grandparents and my parents was always there. So I started working at a young age, and even though it was just Dairy Queen, I gained a lot of friendships, and I understood just you know food in that type of fast food like corporate aspect. And then I went to UIC for political science after high school, and then I dropped out. I went to culinary school in 2010, and I wanted to take it professionally. I knew I could create something my own. Obviously, being spoiled with a good eating mentality on both sides. But I'm very American in my cooking, so don't. I mean, I can make jajic. You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
So
that's
that's
cool.
that's my as far as I go. I'll let my dad do and my grandparents do the rest.
Okay.
But I'm a big barbecue guy. A lot of Southern cuisine. I love working local. Lots of vegetables and just being able to create food from your heart.
And by the rest, with your dad and your grandparents, do you mean do they cook a lot of Assyrian food, or did they kind of? Okay, so they still do. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, so my grandparents are up there now. My grandma just turned 93. My grandfather's 91. So they try to stay as busy as possible, but it's they're not as active as they once were. But Nana will still have toshia, made like from scratch. Harissa is always in the freezer, ready to reheat. My dad makes some great Assyrian rice, and he makes some okay dolma. Actually, he makes a lot of, like chiptapida and things like that.
So this is actually something I wanted to ask later on, but now that we're on the topic, you
Yeah.
mentioned you have one, you do have the one thing that you do know how to make. But have you ever thought about perhaps kind of going old school with some of the grandparents' recipes, incorporating any Assyrian recipes into your upcoming menus, which we'll get into the business venture too, but into your future menus and combining them with your sauces?
You know what? I think they're completely opposite. I would have to do a little more training, and I don't know if Nana's up for the training. I think she's more got to hit me over the head with it. Um, but there's a lot of over the past like 10, 20 years, obviously with the internet, it's accessible more. A lot of people are sharing. I just, I can't remember. It's Assyrian Cooking. It's like a Facebook group that I just found maybe about a month ago. So it's good to hear people, Iraqi Assyrians, which I'm not really familiar with,
Okay.
and Iranian Assyrians, and talking about sharing, the culture and what their food is and their regions, and it's a really big world. But I'd have to do a lot more. I'd have to study it more.
Yeah, understandably, of course. And then to go back to your maternal side with the Norwegian and Swedish, was there any favorite foods that you had that I'm assuming that much of our audience is probably not very familiar with that type of cuisine. Can you fill us in on some of your favorites on that side?
I think. I mean, the most like connective, I guess it would be. It's both sides have kind of peasant cooking to them,
Like
inexpensive
street food,
ingredients,
kind of.
lots of potatoes. So Swedish meatballs. So my great grandma Thielander, she would always make a feast, and they obviously were from the south side of the city, Beverly. She moved to Arkansas, but when we would visit her, when I was back in 1992, I was like 5. She would make potato pancakes and Swedish meatballs, and those were probably the biggest. Those two items that I remember. We mostly ate a lot of American because we were always together for the typical holidays: Christmas, Thanksgiving,
For sure.
Easter, Mother's Day.
And I don't know if you know this, but we actually do have a lot of Assyrians who live in Sweden. A lot of them mostly come
Oh,
from Syria, but obviously there's exceptions too. But yeah, there's a huge Assyrian community in Sweden, like
wow.
Stockholm and the surrounding areas.
Well, that's great.
So I'm assuming they're going to like the connection between the Assyrians and then the Northern Europeans. That's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
interesting, right?
Yeah, that's very interesting. We're all over the place, all
Yes.
over. You did win a contest through Urban Space to win a spot at their new food hall. That was kind of delayed a little bit thanks to COVID. That was supposed to open up sometime in April. So, firstly, what was the competition like? Were you nervous at all? What other food was brought to the table that you had to compete against?
So my wife and I, we started North Branch Gourmet in 2018, bottling up our own barbecue sauces, all natural ingredients, no high fructose corn syrup. And we started at farmers markets here on the Northwest side, Independence Park Farmers Market and Portage Park. And we were just starting out slow, few cases at a time, and just giving a lot of samples out and letting people understand, Chicago style barbecue. And it took off. And I think I've always worked corporate, and I was at a Hilton DoubleTree as the executive chef, and I think I was kind of getting antsy where I wanted to still expand my brand, get more exposure, and actually take this, further. Being 10 years in the industry, it's taught me a lot, and it's allowed me to network and make some friends. And I wanted to see what we could do to take this from zero to, something that's, could be serious and be successful. So there was a new food hall that was opening up, Urban Space, which is a New York-based company, and they have a few in New York. They were opening two in Chicago, and the food challenge was up and coming chefs, trying to support those that have a mission, have a food background, and want to take it to the next level. So I put in a stupid video of, my wife videotaped it. It was hilarious. It was like 30 different takes, stop, start, stop, start. But finally we got it right. And, I just said, we've been starting local. We are local. We believe in Chicago when we make these sauces. And I want to share that passion with my community and with my city. I was chosen along two other women. One lady was doing Indian Mexican fusion, and another lady, I forgot what the African cuisine it was, but both were just tasty. And so I went against both of those ladies, very strong women. Took it to WGN. That was cool. So we did an around town segment. We were at, where were we at? We were at Erie's Cafe where we did it, and this was in October of 2019. And it was great. It was fun. It was awesome to meet, two very strong independent women that had a lot of great cuisines to share also. Ultimately, it was neck and neck, and I ended up winning, which was great. And I was happy for that. And I was happy to meet them. And I'm sure I'll be working with them in the future. But
Nice.
so Urban Space really gave me an opportunity to be noticed, and I'm looking forward to opening. The space is 15 West Washington, Chicago, so it's right at State and Washington. It's a very touristy spot, lots of traffic, lots of
Yeah, that's what, just south of where Chicago Theater is, right?
yeah. The theater district's really close, and we have a lot of good ideas to engage a lot of Chicago consumers to come in and grab lunch and dinner and have a
Nice.
great time.
And so that grand prize consisted of what exactly?
So I got 3 free months of rent. They completely built out my food stall space, which is like 16 by 16 feet. They've been really generous. They've been very helpful. Lots of marketing, logo design, menu development. It's just a great environment to be part of a team where they have just as much passion about food and sharing that with Chicago. Being a New York based company, they wanted a little Chicago flair, which is why they started this competition. They knew how competitive and tough it is to start from scratch and to get exposure and build a brand and create a business. So I feel really comfortable working with them, and I'm glad and I'm very thankful that this has worked in my favor.
And let's take it back a couple phases. You mentioned that in college, to start things off, you had majored in political science, which is completely different than the culinary arts. But there's got to be zero regrets there for dropping that and doing the culinary scene.
Yeah, I'm sure my wife would agree with you that I probably made the right decision. It was, 2006 was, graduating high school was, a good time. I, Barack Obama had a lot of exposure then. I was reading a lot of his books. He was an up and coming figure before his presidential campaign that he announced it. So, and Mayor Daley was finishing up his last term, and it was a good vibe to help. Political science would have been interesting, but I think food allows me to be able to share lots of that same type of community building and creativity at the same time.
Yeah, and so you win this contest, you get your guaranteed space rent free for 3 months. Obviously, COVID slowed everything down. It originally was supposed to open in April.
Yeah.
Did they reassure you shortly after that? Hey, like no matter what, you get to keep your spot, you get to keep everything that you've won, or were there a little bit of nerves there where you may have wondered if it was up in the air?
Yeah, they've been great. They've been very, down to earth, and they're very grounded. as a company, and the team that they have at Urban Space are very friendly and very open. The communication's always been there, so they've had their hands full. Obviously, also with the riots, they've kept us, in the loop to make sure, don't worry, we're still on track, but we're working something. It's in the future. It might be in the next few months, but we're still waiting on the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago with phases of reopening.
And we touched a little bit on obviously your parent or your dad specifically making Assyrian food. Can you describe your overall connection to the Assyrian community now? I know you mentioned that you don't speak it or understand a lot of it, but do you have Assyrian friends or people that you know that you keep around in your life, whether it's just cousins or friends that you met who do speak it, who do go to Assyrian events and everything, or are you kind of, for lack of a better phrase, sort of shut off from the community?
I think yes, definitely. I'm the definitely shut off. And, I grew up, as the only Assyrian. Nobody, what's this being? What do you mean Assyrian? We don't have a country. And well, have you ever read the Bible? And we're all over it. But my grandfather, when I was a little kid, he would always, we have a huge empire. We had a huge, one of the largest civilizations in the world, and I'm just in the back seat nodding my head like, what is he talking about?
But see,
Um,
that's great that despite everything, but despite your upbringing outside of your grandparents, of course, lacking that interaction, you still kind of understood and you still remember all that information that you were told when you were a kid.
yeah, and like I said, things when you're a kid, you're forced to eat things that you may not understand, you may not like, and hadith is one of those things that I still choose not to eat, just because I mean, I'm sure I'll eat it sooner or later, but it's from the childhood memories, I'd rather just have a big plate of dolma, and
Right on.
tortilla, and stuff like that. But I always grew up just no, not connected to the Assyrian community. My cousins, those are the only ones that I would say that we're still close and we still keep the Assyrian background, but we're American, and I don't mean that in any condescending
Sure.
way. When my grandparents were born here, they assimilated. They wanted to be American. Like my grandfather grew up with Irish and Polish and German immigrants, and he became a butcher. And I mean, my grandpa will still eat more spare ribs and sauerkraut and smoked pork butt than any Assyrian, because he loved that type of food. And, my great grandma, she would go in the morning and go to the bakery and pick up donuts and stuff like that. And she was from, Iran, but when coming here, Piper's Alley and Old Town and around there is, you wouldn't have the same ingredients, but you would try to recreate Assyrian or Armenian cuisine. But having a donut and buying pastries and stuff like that, they still wanted to be part of the culture.
And I think that was a pretty common theme too, especially in the early 20th century when America was like, hey, everybody come over here and you could live this great life. It was sort of
Yeah.
all about assimilating. So I don't necessarily blame anybody around that time for doing any of that. You touched on your family being from Iran originally. Do you happen to know where specifically from Iran that they were from?
Yeah. Was it Lake Urmia?
Yeah, yeah, right on. That's
So
where a majority of the Assyrians who are from Iran come from.
yeah, and I just remember my grandfather telling me that there was a lot of hostility because being Christian, and the government wouldn't protect any of the villages, Christian villages whatsoever. So coming over here to the United States and being safe, free from persecution, building your own churches, and having a chance to create the community that you wanted there here and
And
still
you
make your own
mentioned
flag.
you
Yeah.
1915 was the year that your great-grandparents came here?
1915, 1920. My dad could probably tell you a little more. He's got a lot
Okay.
of the pictures. My dad has a whole ton he could probably talk to you about.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind getting some of those pictures from your dad and sending them my way, we could post them on the account. There's a great account in the Assyrian community called Meso Portrayal, who recently did a thing where basically everybody sent in their old school, Assyrian family pictures, and they kind of spread them on Instagram and Twitter. So it's really great to people I've never met before in my life, and just seeing their pictures of their grandparents and great grandparents from the 20s, 30s, the 80s.
Yep,
90s. It was just really cool to see. So that's
it
always a
is.
great story. You mentioned your dad, knows a lot more than you do, but do you recall any stories that you heard from your grandparents about the genocide in particular, commonly referred to as the Armenian genocide because they were the most affected?
Yeah, we definitely talked about it. I'm my dad could probably, yeah, could go a little further into the info about it. I don't know how affected my family was by that, but I do know that we consider that, a huge grievance. Turkey not being able to acknowledge it, or make it right even 100 years after. So it is, something that we do discuss. We have discussed in the past.
And throughout all this talk mentioning, you guys are perfectly assimilated. You consider yourself an American, but you obviously still value your Assyrian Armenian background, even the Norwegian and Swedish half.
Yeah.
Do you ever wish that there was a stronger connection, or are you so ingrained in, the quote unquote American lifestyle and the way your life has gone that you don't really think much about it? Or do you wish there was a stronger connection there?
Maybe I do think there was a little more stronger connection, but had a great childhood. My grandparents really instilled, the history and, the pride of being Assyrian, and from our families coming with nothing and creating, a home and a better life for their children. And my grandparents gave that to my dad, and my dad gave it to us. And I would love to do that in the future for my own.
Absolutely. And you've created a lot on your own as well. We touched on the contest you won through Urban Space. So you get that food hall, but that's not the only thing you have cooking up, pun intended there. You have a restaurant that you're opening up also on the Northwest side. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So with the urban space, a little bit into the future, my wife and I found a building at a previous employer that I used to work at on the far northwest side of the city. It used to be a barbecue restaurant, and it's a beautiful restaurant. It's fantastic, and we're not going to do barbecue here. We're going to do fried chicken. Still going to use our barbecue sauces, bottle them up, our spice rubs, and we're just going to focus on fresh salads, fresh sides, but keep it very simple. A nice, steakhouse burger, a whitefish po' boy, and we're going to just focus on another type of cuisine, Southern cuisine, that we can still pair our barbecue sauce and our spices to.
So is this going to be a fairly simple menu, or is it going to be a whole bunch of fried chicken?
Yeah, so we're doing like a 2, 4, 8 piece, 16 piece. So we're
Nice.
encouraging families in the community, because the Northwest side where we are is, very blue collar, and lots of families, lots of churches, lots of schools. So we want to kind of build into that and get in, offer families, wholesome, high quality food at a wonderful price, and still have, just natural ingredients and free of preservatives and fake substances and things like that.
And the name of this restaurant is going to be
So we're still under the North Branch name, being from the northwest side of the city, the North Branch of the Chicago River. I try to use that in a barbecue aspect and as a Chicago reference. It's an utilized, under recognized natural resource, and the forest preserves that we have up here are just they're beautiful. Um, and I wanted to instill that into our brand because we are a Chicago based concept. And I just wanted to bring a little of that flair back to the far northwest side of the city.
excellent. And now that we have the inside scoop, if
Yeah.
you could tell us one combination of chicken and sauce, if it was your last meal and you're like, let me get one of my bottles of sauces one last time with some fried chicken, what would you go with?
You know what? I love everything, but I think I'm
I
a
knew
little
you were
biased.
going to say that.
We only make two different sauces. We do a
Okay.
Windy City style barbecue sauce, which is tomato based. It's got a little Kansas City tones to it, because when we talk about Chicago style barbecue, we're talking about the Mississippi Delta and the Great Migration. After the Civil War, and that that culture, bringing it through Kansas City up to Chicago. So tomato base is our style. It has some molasses. It's got chipotle peppers, so it's smoky. And then
Nice.
we spike it with a little bit of local coffee that we use from a roastery here. So it's got a little zip, but it's very sweet. It's very tasty. It's think of that Sweet Baby Ray's squeeze bottle grocery store barbecue sauce. Well, this is it with zero high fructose corn syrup and all natural ingredients.
Nice.
Um, the last sauce that we do it's a Windy City mustard barbecue, which is whole grain mustard, honey, and sriracha. So it's kind of like a honey mustard with on steroids.
I'm there for both. Those both sound absolutely
A free
delicious.
sample over there.
I wish I had some fried chicken in front of me right now with both of those
Yeah,
sauces. Just dip one with the left hand, one with the right, and just coming from both
can't
sides.
stop. Yeah.
Can't stay exactly. Can't stop. What's Can you in general just lend some advice to anyone out there with culinary business ideas that they might have? Maybe tell us about some of the difficult or unexpected parts of the process of opening up your own business.
Yeah, I think doing a lot of research in terms of the legal aspects with assumed business names and LLCs and cottage food laws. Depending, I would what I did, obviously having my food handlers certified food handler certificate from the city of Chicago and having a lot of connections with uh, distributors and food vendors allowed me to pick my vendors' brains, my sales reps' brains, and finding out what type of food trends are out there. Do things work? What are things people looking for? To taste, because a lot of ethnic foods are very popular right now.
Oh,
People,
absolutely.
South American cuisine, Middle Eastern cuisine, African cuisine, Indian cuisine, like people want to get creative. So I would obviously, if you're good at something, work on it, ask, always ask for advice, take constructive criticism. Even my sauce, nothing's perfect. And you want like tighten it up and make sure that everything is your recipes on point and hear other people's feedback, what's right, what's wrong. And obviously from a business standpoint, I can cook, but I've never been a good salesperson.
Hmm.
Um, so engaging customers and signing up for farmers markets and saying hello and trying to create a conversation and not be too wordy, which I'm not good at. I talk way too much, as you can tell. um, my wife's
It's good in
laughing, so
this.
that's not
It's good in
fun.
this
But
instance.
yeah, and you just have fun with it. Don't get bogged down with all the seriousness. Yes, be professional, but ultimately have fun with it and just let it unfold in front of you. And every step of the way, don't jump too quick and let it build a momentum on its own. And if something's wrong, fix it. If something's right, keep going with that and build on that. And that's pretty much what I have.
How would you say, and I just thought of this off the top of my head. Let's say if I just wanted to create a short and simple American diner experience where all I sell are burgers, hot dogs, sausages, and chicken sandwiches, and I'm 2 weeks into the business and nobody's ordering the grilled chicken sandwich. Do I hesitate and kind of leave that on the menu, or do I lop that off immediately?
Yeah, I mean, you start seeing me rolling Doma, to replace it on the menu, then you'll know, all right, it's not working. But being able to work in professional kitchens for the past 10 years in casinos, country clubs, and hotels here in the Chicagoland area has allowed me to be able to engage different types of clientele, understanding different people's tastes. So those 10 years, I've been able to craft and hone my recipes and what works and what doesn't. So I'm hoping I can knock this out of the park from the get go. But you have to be open to people's, hey, this is good, but maybe okay, you got to just be open to hearing how to make something better. Because, food is subjective, right? Just like music, just like art. It's great to you, but some people, their palates might not be refined. When you grow up eating White Castle and you consider White Castle as a burger and you give somebody something gourmet like a steakhouse blend burger and they're like, yeah, it was okay, but they're perceiving it from what they grew up eating. And
Right.
some people might say that's too salty, too spicy, too fatty, whatever it may be. So in this industry, you want to just, make sure everybody's taken care of. You want to knock it out of the park, but just be confident in what you're doing, but just take criticism accordingly and adjust.
See, one of the things that you can probably do with your background and expertise, whereas I can never do, I can never explain why I like something. I can tell you why I don't like something. Never explain why something is good. And I know one thing that you and I have in common is we both love it's an Italian deli place in the West Loop called JP Graziano. We both agree
The
that it's
best.
the best sandwich in all of Chicago. But I
Yeah.
can never tell anybody why it's the best. I'm like, it's just good. Can you break down what makes their very simple Italian sandwich better than anybody else's?
Yeah, and I want to mention Tempesta Market, which is on Grand Avenue.
Aha.
Tony
Yeah.
Fiash is awesome, and he's more of a he's modern, he's updated, he's about these food trends now, also about culture and tradition, but putting new spins and new takes on those old school classics. So when going back to JP Graziano's, Jimmy's a great friend, and when I was in culinary school, a friend of mine, well, another student there took me there in 2010. Never heard of it, and the West Loop was completely different 10 years ago than
Oh
it
yeah.
is today. And this shop, I think JP is three generations, and you know the family, the Italian family, and instilling that upbringing of culture and family is very important. And when you get that sandwich, it's D'Amato's bread. It's crusty, but it's soft on the inside,
Yes.
and it's just simple ingredients. It's crispy lettuce that's dressed accordingly.
Do you
It's
think it's
deli
perhaps
meats.
the attention to, like, the smaller details that maybe some of these chains or some of these big places that, blow up for about a month before they go down? Do you think it's the attention to the smaller detail that may be lacking in other spots?
Yeah, and what JP Graziano's understands is their customer, and they understand a sandwich can be done so poorly. So if you end up eating at Subway and then you eat a JP Graziano sub, you'll be like, what the hell is this? You don't
Yes.
this is flavor. This, what Jimmy's doing. Yeah, exactly. It's the small things done right. And he's not trying to change or, mess with anything. He knows what works. It's just doing it better and having some care and some patience and creating a really tasty sandwich.
Is that also a similar direction that you took with your sauces, where you took maybe some generic barbecue sauces and you're like, this is fine, or it's not so good. I can make it even better.
Yeah, going down the grocery store aisle, you'll see a lot of sticky high fructose corn syrup, squeeze bottle stuff, and it's barbecue is so simple, and it's the same thing where you're talking about a sub sandwich where it's simple ingredients, it's quality ingredients. You just got to treat them right. You have to like pull and draw flavors out of those simple ingredients, and then from there, it's just watching it and commanding it. Like I couldn't find a lot of sauce that was corn syrup free. So I began creating my own ketchup. So the Windy City barbecue sauce starts with tomato paste, white vinegar, pure cane sugar, and salt. That's it. And instead of buying that, can of ketchup that's just high fructose, start with simple ingredients, tomato, and from there, molasses and Worcestershire and whole grain mustard and blending a proprietary blend of spices and spiking it and just elevating the simple things to a higher level.
You bring up high fructose corn syrup, and I'm glad you did, because the first time I realized the real difference between that and pure cane sugar was actually in root beer. When I realized that the root beer brands that use pure cane tasted much better than the high fructose corn syrup. Is it just a flavor imbalance there, or is there like a health benefit to having one over the other? What makes effectively one not as good as the other one?
Well, I mean, ultimately, high fructose corn syrup isn't recognized by your body. It's a foreign substance, but it's a cheap substance that people can, corporations can push out, easily. Sugar, obviously, everything in moderation, right? And
Right.
but it's still natural. Sugar cane is still a natural product. And I'm not asking you to drink a cup of barbecue sauce. It's if you want to enjoy some high quality cheese or something that's really just eat something that's tasty and wholesome, a little of it goes a long way. So, talking about just quality ingredients and having less of it, enjoying it, savoring it goes a long way in understanding what, real food should taste like and enjoy.
We've talked about family, we've talked about food. If you had the chance to have, let's say, a dinner with any of your relatives who first came to America, where would you take them now if you had that ability to build that time machine? And what would you talk about over that dinner?
Hmm. You know what? That's a good question. I would have liked to meet my great grandparents on my dad's side. I would have liked to meet my great grandparents on my mom's side too. That would have been awesome. Taking them, I think I would rather probably do a dinner of all of us together instead of going out. Even though there's tons of great Chicago restaurants,
Sure.
I think the best thing about our family is we know how to eat. We grew up eating good food, wholesome food, food that we make from scratch, having a garden, and just knowing what was simple. Whether it's American food, whether it's Swedish or Norwegian, whether it's Assyrian Armenian. We always loved coming together and creating and cooking and being at the dinner table all together. I think it would be just a mashup of all different foods, though. Swedish meatballs and potato pancakes and doma, and there's got to be a baked ham there somewhere.
Of
There's got
course.
to be there's got to be lamb. So we got to have a rack of lamb or a leg of lamb that's been roasted, for a few hours with lots of herbs and garlic, lots of garlic actually. Too much garlic sometimes, but lots of vegetables. We do eat a lot of vegetables.
Are you
And
going to add in some Chicago style hot dogs too while you're at it, just for local tradition's sake?
what I was thinking about doing was, maybe not Chicago, but definitely doing a brat. I'm like one of the few that still drinks old style, and I kind of like. Well, I mean, it's got a lot of Midwestern culture to it. It's a little like it's old school, right? Cubs and being in the early '90s and
Oh
'80s,
yeah.
and I don't know. It's really nostalgic, and I'm gonna use that on a beer battered whitefish. So, and obviously whitefish, Great Lakes, and they all go hand in hand with the type of concept that I want to create. That's community Midwest. So I wanted to put a brat on there, and maybe it's not the Chicago style hot dog, but an old style brat, simmered and then charred on the grill with, you know, make some house made jardinera and some, Windy City mustard barbecue, and that's our take on it. And I don't want to be foreign to anybody where it's like, what is this food? And it's like, no, this is food that but it's just done right.
Sure. What do you think you would talk to your great grandparents about over this dinner?
Probably their struggle, probably what they grew growing up in Iran, dealing with persecution, finding a way here to the United States, building a family. My grandparents still, they have very for being in their 90s, have very strong memories, and I'm sure they could write a book because it was just such a different time back then. They've got so much to talk about and share with. It's really valuable information from a family standpoint.
I would even say not to overstep, but just to merely suggest the next time you're with them, just launch the recorder on your phone and just have them talk for hours because
Yeah,
it's nice to have that story forever on an audio thing. That's why we do this podcast to begin with, because it's a bunch of great stories from a bunch of great people who might be known the entire Assyrian community over, or might not be known by anybody. But either way, the story is a valuable one to tell.
yeah, and it's unfortunate that they're 90 now,
Yeah.
and we're losing that good generation. It was regardless of what they were, Assyrian Armenian, it was just a strong generation of people that suffered through a ton and just persevered, and were able to create a strong, the United States was a strong economic power, and uh, to find, still maintain culture and tradition throughout it all. They were just a completely strong generation. And it's sad to be losing them.
Let's recap a little bit. So you have two up and coming restaurants, so to speak, one in a food hall, urban space. Are you allowed to, or do you know when that might be officially open? I know we're still going through, not necessarily quarantine. We have kind of a slow open happening right now. So I wonder how that's going to affect food halls. But do you have a date in mind?
No, I know it's what they're planning for a fall opening, but like I said, it all depends on these phases of reopening and between the governor and all the medical experts that are weighing in, and obviously the mayor, because the city of Chicago also is allowed to, create their own rules. So it's a play it by ear, but we're going to be ready, and we're hoping that we can launch on the right foot, still be able to offer Chicago style barbecue, very familiar, community focused, community oriented.
Now, North Branch Chicken, is there a target date with that in mind?
Yeah, we're actually pushing for June 16th opening, which is about 8 days from now. So it's not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday. And you could find us. We're still creating our website, but we're on social media. We're on our Facebook. We're on Instagram. Our website, northbranchgourmet.com. You can find our barbecue sauces and spice rubs all available for purchase. But we are crafting the restaurant webpage, and we're hoping to get that up within the next few days.
Yeah, that's no problem at all because by the time this airs, we're taking a break in June, so new episodes roll out in July. So by the time this comes out, you guys will have been open for roughly about a month and a half or so. So the word will definitely get out. Assyrians love to eat, and they love to support Assyrian-owned restaurants. So with those two coming up, one very soon, one hopefully sometime in the fall, is the long-term plan hopefully to keep both going so you have not only your sort of creative outlets be different, but also just having sort of your branding out there in two different spaces?
Yeah, I would love to continue to start working on a wholesale of our bottled sauces and spice rubs. That would be in the works. But yes, definitely staying creative and chef driven, culinarily, like new dishes, new concepts. I've got a lot of fine dining background, but I think that's all kind of pushed me because the fine dining is kind of more pressure. It's allowed me to say, why I love barbecue and doing fried chicken and Southern cuisine and American cuisine is because, it's from the heart. It's more laid back. It's more honest and not as flashy. It really, the ingredients will speak for itself. And that's what I really love about it. And just putting a Chicago and uh, approach to it.
Are we able to buy any of your sauces online?
Yeah.
Give us the details.
Yeah, so we've been bottling our sauces for wholesale and direct to customer. So you can order through our website. We have a link. You could check us out. We've got a couple of sauces, barbecue, a couple spice rubs. I was doing a couple savory jams. I got to make a new batch. But yeah, check us out at www.northbranchgourmet.com.
And to tie it all back to, you mentioned selling cases of this stuff at a time. I'm aware, for example, that a case of beer happens to be 30 cans of beer. What makes a case of barbecue sauce?
Well, we go by the 12 to a case.
Okay.
Um, 16-ounce jars. So it goes a long way. You're able to share it with all your family and friends. They make, obviously, for Father's Day coming up for the grilling, with June, July, and August. Feel free to stock up, and we're using all natural ingredients, nothing fake, so you can be happy sharing that with family and friends and tasting the difference. What our Chicago barbecue sauce has compared to that squeeze bottle grocery store product.
I think now that things are slowly returning to kind of what they were before
Yeah.
March. Yeah, I live in the city, Lincoln Park myself, but I live in an apartment, so I don't really have a chance to grill out or anything. So I don't really use sauces of any kind. I have mustard in my fridge, and I think that's
Yeah.
it. But now that I'm going to be visiting my mom and my brother again, we're going to get the grill going. I'm going to have to stock up on some of that North Branch Gourmet and see what chicken my mom can make that'll go well with that. But in the meantime, yeah, make sure to check out a North Branch Gourmet you're on Facebook and Instagram, I
Instagram.
believe. Yeah. So you want to
Yeah.
give out the handles for that as well?
Yeah. Northbranchgourmet.com. You'll be able to find us on Facebook and Instagram. Pops up real quick. But yeah, I'd love to see a lot of new people and create some new memories and build new friendships.
And building off of that, we always like to end with a giant looming question to our guest. We obviously have a worldwide audience, predominantly Assyrian, but we get non-Assyrian listeners too. But if there's one thing you could say to our global audience of primarily Assyrians, what would you have to say to them?
I'd have to say that I'd like to meet more of you, build more friendships and more connections. We're a very proud people. We care about food, we care about family, we care about our communities. Obviously, looking for better places to live to create that for the next generation. And I'm happy to tell people my culture and my name with other people that might not be as familiar.
Right
So
on.
don't stop. Don't stop. Share that Assyrian pride.
Awesome. John, I appreciate you for your time. I'll definitely
Thank
be
you.
hitting up North Branch Chicken sometime in June. I'm in the city as well, so it's not a far trip away, and I look forward to feasting at that food hall, Urban Space Food Hall, as soon as that opens up as well. But good luck with everything, and I hope you get the support that you deserve. And best of luck in all the future business ventures that you have and culinary experiences.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for
Thanks, John.
talking.
Thanks for sticking with us on this episode of the Assyrian Podcast. I hope you loved it as much as I did. And I want to encourage you to share the Assyrian Podcast with your friends, with your family, subscribe to it, and let us know what you think. We love hearing from our listeners. And remember, the Assyrian Podcast is all about highlighting the story of Assyrians from all around the world. Let us know what you've got going on, stay in touch, and let's keep on encouraging one another. Have a great week.